Welcome to the top 10 most popular commanders from September. Today we have a bunch of new cards because we have a new set. Let's look at the first one, Valgavoth. And to clarify, we always start with the most popular one because that's the most fun. So I hope your commander is very popular and your coffee is warm because we'll start right away. Valgavoth is a very popular commander right now because he has a precon. What we see every time is that the precon commanders are very popular, so it really works. The fact that Wizards is pushing out 4 precons every set. Also, I think this is the most popular one because we are really looking for a good Rakdos commander, and Valgavoth can be that, because what Rakdos is missing is ramp and card draw most of the time, and in this case, without sacrificing a bunch of life, you do get actual card draw. Valgavoth says whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, you put a +1 counter on Valgavoth, so you have a strong commander, and you draw a card. And I think that's the most important part here, the fact that you can draw cards finally. 3 a turn cycle, but that's still more than you'd get usually because, well, you could do it, but then you would lose so much life that actually you were the one to die first while you were actually playing the aggro deck. So I think that's why people love Valgavoth the most. Also, there's a bunch of lore for Valgavoth being the main villain of the set, and many people like that, definitely Rakdos players. So this just works. Next up is another precon commander, Aminatou, the Veil Piercer, not the Purser. It's 3 colors, so I would say that bumps it up already. But also, people like big enchantments, and we have seen that in the previous set as well, and we will see that in this top 10 even more. But this one just is so simple. It just says that basically any enchantment can get a cost reduction of 4 colorless mana. So that will allow you to easily cast 5 mana enchantments after this, but you could also very quickly play any, even if it's 10 mana, it would be very easy to in 2 or maybe 1 turn play that enchantment after you played your commander. So I think this really plays to that sort of vibe where you want to play big splashy spells, and it's in Esper, and that color combination doesn't usually get those types of big splashy effects because it's usually a control color scheme. Next up is Marina Vendrell, and this one is very easy to talk about because it's popular because it has 5 colors. I think every time we get a new 5-color commander, it gets really popular really quickly. Marina Vendrell works with the room mechanic that has been introduced on Duskmourn. She says when she enters, you look at the top 7 cards, everyone looks at them, and you put all enchantment cards from among them into your hand. So you could draw 7. And she has the ability to tap and lock or unlock a door of target room you control. Now, unlocking a door is done, but locking the door again is really unique because then you get to unlock the door again later. So any effects that work with, for example, those enter the battlefield effects from the rooms do happen again, and I think people love recurring value, but I think mostly people love the fact that she is 5 colors. Next up is Yuriko, who gets back into the top 10, and this usually happens when a new card is revealed that works really well with them, and I think in this case it's Kaido, the Bane of Nightmares, which is a ninja card that really strengthens them really quickly because it's a 4 mana planeswalker, where the +1 ability actually is the most important part, I feel, because it says you get an emblem with the ninjas you control get +1/+1. Now, usually Lord effects aren't that strong, but when you get them on an emblem that gets to grow every turn as long as you have Kaido out, I think that's just really appealing. Also, during your turn, as long as Kaido has one or more loyalty counts on him, so he's alive, he's a 3/4 ninja creature and has hexproof. That also means that you get to grow your Kaido, and it also means that you get a ninja creature. And I think another fun part of this, so Kaido, you can minus to tap a creature and put 2 stun counters on it. Not the most flashy effect, but it's a minus ability. And you can get Kaido back into your hand, then ninjutsu him back in again, to have him back as a creature, but also to use the ability again to tap a creature and put 2 stun counters on it. Also, something you can do is ninjutsu him out, play him again, and then put another emblem onto the battlefield, and then you'll be strengthening your ninjas even more. So you could do this on your own to combo off, make your ninjas really strong, or you could use this as an effect that gets you more value. So I think that's why Kaido makes Yuriko really popular again. And we will look at the art of Yuriko, because that's what we always do when it's the third time they get into the top 10. So Yuriko has, I think, really appealing art on a card because it really quickly tells you what she is about. She is a ninja that fights with really weird weapons, and that's basically it. We have looked at the lore of her before, and that's also just basically it. She has a scary mask, that's basically all we're getting, and she fights to fight the strong and give power to the weak, so she's basically a ninja Robin Hood. Might be enough for you lore-wise, but I think you're mostly playing her because of the big damage she could dish out, and because of the fact you like ninjas and you don't really have many other choices. So, in the art, we see a very dynamic pose. She's ready to fight, and that's basically all you can see from here. One other thing I find interesting is the fact that Kamigawa now, of course, is Neon Kamigawa, and Yuriko is from Kamigawa, but the old Kamigawa. So probably she died already, and she has, like many other characters on Kamigawa, someone who has replaced her. So we're wondering, will we get a sort of replacement Yuriko later? I think that would be really fun. Next up is a returning factor that we have almost always. The Ur-Dragon is here for the 6th time, so we need a new theme. Every time some card returns, we give them a new idea that we could talk about. For the Ur-Dragon, we've done a lot of things, but now we're choosing the sidekick that would be really cool for the commander to have. It would be a hypothetical creature that you could play alongside the commander as a sort of second commander. Doesn't have to be legendary, but it does have to be in exactly the same colors as the Ur-Dragon. Of course, this would be a really overpowered mechanic, so if you choose to use that mechanic, talk about it with your friends first. Could be fun though. For the big dragon, I chose another big dragon. Tiamat is another 5-color dragon, and that's all we were really looking for. But he also works with other dragons, because when Tiamat enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you search your library for up to 5 dragon cards not named Tiamat that each have different names. You reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle. So basically in Commander you get to draw 5 dragons. You do need to cast Tiamat, so I think this works really well for this extra sidekick format, because the Ur-Dragon has the cool ability to let you put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield, and Tiamat doesn't really want that to happen to it. So you don't really want it in your hand, so you don't really want it in the 99 in that way. You do want it because of the cool effect, but this is the best of both worlds. Next up, we have Zimone, the Mystery Unraveler, a Simic commander, which is, I think, the biggest part of why she's popular right now. Aside from, of course, she's new and she has a precon. I think that's very obviously the only thing keeping her in the top 10, because she's, I would say, sorry, but really generic. She has a landfall ability, and whenever the landfall ability is Manifest Dread, if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. Otherwise, you may turn a permanent you control face up. Now that last part is the most interesting part about Zimone, so I could see her becoming more popular because people get to see how strong turning a permanent you control face up could be if it's free. But I think the biggest part people see is whenever land you control enters, you manifest dread this. You manifest dread, and that just means you put one of the top 2 cards of your library onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. And we have seen that ability before on legendary creatures with more colors. So I think Zimone just gets outclassed by those other commanders. Next up is, I think, an interesting one, a new card called Arabella the Abandoned Doll. And why is she really interesting? She's an uncommon, so she will be cheap, but also usually uncommons aren't really that cool to play with. Well, in this case we have Arabella, which really works well with other cards. She really doesn't seem interesting. She says, whenever she attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent and you gain X life. That's really basic, you would say, but you deal the X damage, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. Now you would say, that's still not interesting, but this is actually a way for Boros to become strong, and that is really interesting. Because Arabella is just 2 mana to play, then you can probably give her haste, because that is something that Boros is really good at. And then you can probably make a bunch of creatures, because that is what Boros is really good at. Then you get to deal X damage, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. Boros often has creatures that are 2 or less power, and it's very easy to, I think, make at least 10 creatures before turn 4. And then you can get in with Arabella and deal 10 damage to every opponent. Isn't that interesting? I think it's just strong, and that's why it's really popular, but this has great potential for a fun Boros deck that is actually about the things Boros wants to do. So I'm hoping this really pops off. One thing that's really strong is Stormherd. It was already really strong. It's a 10 mana card, so you will need a bunch of mana, which you probably won't have in Boros. But when you do get to Stormherd, I think this is now so much stronger than before. It seems overpowered. Create X 1/1 white Pegasus creature tokens with flying, where X is your life total. If you still have 40 life, you would create 40 1/1s with flying, and that would mean you can probably win the game. But you do need to attack with those creatures, and that was usually why you wouldn't win with this really big sorcery. But Arabella deals X damage, where X is the amount of creatures you control with power 2 or less, and 1 power counts. So that means you get to immediately deal 40 damage to all of your opponents, and you get 40 life if you would get the 40 Pegasi. So that is really strong. Killing all of your opponents at once is way stronger than killing one at a time. So I think that's another reason for Arabella to be really strong, and I think it's making for a really interesting commander, even though she doesn't have a draw effect or a ramp effect. And then not even last, it's the 10th slide. That's not the last card. Miss Bumbleflower is back, second time she is here, and she of course is popular because of her lore. She's really cute, and actually she's really strong as well, and I will show you why. So Miss Bumbleflower is a 4 mana commander that says whenever you cast a spell, which you will do, target opponent draws a card. You might think, I don't want that, but you also get to put a +1 counter on a creature, and it gains flying until end of turn. That means that you will get to grow a creature for one, but it also gets to get in really easily. And then if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, so 2 of your opponents have drawn a card, you draw 2 cards as well. So if you can make sure that every turn you give 2 opponents a card and you get 2 cards, you're getting ahead because one of your opponents isn't drawing a card. And every time we look at a card that has returned for the second time, we look at other cards that go great with it. And here is the power of Miss Bumbleflower, working with every creature you want and every card you want actually, and making them stronger and drawing cards. Things you really want to do. Feather Mage is one possibility, a 4 mana creature with Evolve, which means whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it has greater power or toughness than this creature, you put a +1 counter on this creature. Then, whenever you put a +1 counter on Feather Mage, you may draw a card. Now usually when you are just playing Feather Mage in any deck, this is already pretty strong, because every time you play a bigger creature, you get a +1 counter on Feather Mage and you get to draw a card. Now, in this case, it's really easy to put a +1 counter on Feather Mage, because whenever you're playing a spell, you get to draw a card extra. So now it becomes valuable to give your opponents a card every time. Another card that's already good with this strategy is Wizard Class. 1 mana for an enchantment that says you have no maximum hand size, and in this deck you might need that because you're drawing a bunch of cards. Then you can level it up to draw 2 cards. At this point you've paid 4 mana for 2 cards, which is on par. And then when it levels up again, here comes the kicker, whenever you draw a card you put a +1 counter on target creature you control. Something you already want to do in this deck, but also something that combos off with Feather Mage. Because whenever you draw a card you put a +1 counter on Feather Mage, and whenever you put a +1 counter on Feather Mage, you may draw a card, and when you draw a card you may put a +1 counter on Feather Mage with Wizard Class. So you're going infinite, and you can stop at any time, the best kind of infinite. And cards like Kutzil, Malamet Exemplar, a new one from Ixalan, are really cool with this deck because you're growing a bunch of creatures, giving them way more +1 counters. And Kutzil says, whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card again. And you love drawing cards in this deck, so that's really strong. We have another returning factor, Atraxa, also here for the 6th time, so we will be choosing another sidekick for Atraxa. Now this one is a little bit hard because these colors really only have 3 creatures in them. And so I've chosen to let Atraxa's sidekick be Atraxa. Atraxa Grand Unifier is a little bit more expensive, 3 extra mana, basically double. Has the same keywords, so Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch and Lifelink, being really thematic. She's still flying in the same manner. I don't think she can put her arms down, actually. And she says, whenever she enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. Way better than Marina. For each card type, you put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand, and you put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Now you would say this has nothing to do with Atraxa. Well, I beg to differ, because whoa, I just noticed something which I will tell you in a minute. But because in Atraxa you will have a bunch of card types. Maybe you're just working with planeswalkers, that's one way to build this deck, but usually you will have anything. You will have enchantments that double your counters, you will have creatures that get +1 counters on them, you will have planeswalkers that get extra loyalty counters. So there's a bunch of types of cards that you can use, and Atraxa really wants that. Now the thing I noticed just now was the fact that Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, has 4 mana as a cost and is a 4/4, so basically perfect. And the Grand Unifier costs 7 mana and is a 7/7. Now think about that what you may. We're going on to the next one. Bello, the Bard of the Brambles, is a new one, returning for the 2nd time. Really cool commander, I would say, because he works with big spells. Who doesn't love it? Bello says each non-equipment artifact and non-aura enchantment you control with mana value 4 or greater is a 4/4 elemental creature and has indestructible haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So basically what you want to do in this deck, and it isn't really synergizing in many ways, but it's just you want to play big enchantments, usually enchantments, could be artifacts, and you want to get in with them, attack with them, be aggressive, give them all haste, indestructible, so you can still get their effects because they're surviving, and you get to draw a bunch of cards in group. Isn't that exactly what you want from a commander again? Bello works with some interesting types of cards. First of all, vehicles. Vehicles you could already turn into creatures, of course, but you would have to tap one of your creatures. In this example with the Weatherlight, you need to tap 3 power worth of creatures. And you don't really want to do that. Well, Bello makes the Weatherlight into a creature, so you don't have to do that anymore. The Weatherlight will be a flying, haste, indestructible, elemental vehicle that also draws your cards when it deals damage. And when it deals common damage to a player, you look at the top 5 cards of your library to reveal a historic card, which could be an artifact, and put it into your hand. So that's way better than it was before. So vehicles are one way to build this. Who would have thought? Gruul vehicles. I really wouldn't. Big enchantments are something you like. Unnatural Growth, 5 mana, perfect. You don't want it to be way more than 4. And says at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. So all of your enchantments will be 8/8s. And it will be an 8/8 itself while you're attacking. And then we have Enduring Courage, a new type of card because it's a Glimmer. It's a 4 mana enchantment creature, and enchantment creatures can be turned into the 4/4s as well. So it will get +1/+1. Isn't that really cool? Well, that's just one part of this, because the Glimmers, when they die, they will return to the battlefield under their owner's control as an enchantment. Think about that and pause the video if you want to think about it. But Enduring Courage is really cool because it keeps on returning. So what happens when it dies? It will return to the battlefield as an enchantment, and because it's just an enchantment, it will also be a creature. And then the ability just sees it being a creature, so when it dies again, it will return under its owner's control. So it never dies. You don't have to let your Glimmer of Hope die anymore. That's perfect. So that was it for this video. I want to thank you for watching, and I wish you a nice day. Bye.